Hi, I'm Robbie Bobby. In this video, we'll look at the last three Tony A steps, 10, 11, and 12. And since there's a lot of ground to cover, I'm going to jump right in. Step 10, we continue to take personal inventory and to love and approve of ourselves. It's important to note that this is the first time the Tony A steps have us take a personal inventory. The inventory in step 4 was of our parents. In the intervening steps, we've looked at the exact nature of our childhood abandonment. Step 5, we become entirely ready to heal and asked our higher power to help us with our healing process. Step 6 and 7. And we become willing to open ourselves to receive unconditional love from our higher power as well as from ourselves. Steps 8 and 9. Only now are we spiritually equipped to take a personal inventory, when it can be done in the spirit of self-love and self-approval. Remember, we're dealing with emotional wounds from childhood that need love in order to heal. If our personal inventory leads to beating ourselves up or triggers a shame spiral, for example, then the wounds will not heal. They will only get worse. This is why Step 10 reminds us to love and approve of ourselves. And what is the nature of the inventory? What exactly are we looking for? Simply this. Are we moving towards or away from self-love? Here's a hint. If you're acting out on traits, that is moving away from self-love. If you're acting out on harmful behaviors or even contemplating it, then you're moving away from self-love. In my mind, every trait points back to an unhealed emotional wound and is in fact a reminder that we need to love ourselves. Step 10 reminds us of this over and over again. By the way, even if you had a good day, Step 10 reminds us to continue loving and approving ourselves. No matter what, we love and approve of ourselves. You know, it's easy to love yourself when everything is going well and you feel like you're fully in recovery, not acting out, and emotionally sober. To love and approve of yourself when you're acting out, that is unconditional love. It's what Step 9 prepares us for. We became willing to accept our own unconditional love by understanding that our higher power loves us unconditionally. Step 10 allows us to put this into practice. This is what heals our childhood wounds. When the inner child and the inner teen feel love and approval no matter what. In my opinion, Step 10 is an integral part of the healing process. Therefore, it's not something you do once and then check off your list of things to do. Hence the wording, we continued to take personal inventory. Step 11. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our higher power, praying only for knowledge of its will for us and the power to carry it out. For this step, I will simply tell you how I approach it, which is in the context of the Tony A steps, specifically the higher power steps. You see, prayer and meditation are universal spiritual tools and can be used in endless ways. When I'm working on ACA Recovery, I try to focus conscious contact in certain areas. Clarity, Step 2. Trust, Step 3. The exact nature of my childhood abandonment, Step 5. Help with my healing process, Step 6 and 7. Willingness and accepting unconditional love, Steps 8 and 9. Knowledge in these areas and the power to carry it out, Step 11. And spiritual awakening, Step 12. All of these steps mention higher power. When I incorporate them into my Step 11, It helps me see how important higher power is in my recovery process, and that I cannot do these steps on my own. Step 12. We have had a spiritual awakening as a result of taking these steps, and we continue to love ourselves and to practice these principles in all our affairs. The opening line of this step promises a spiritual awakening as a result of taking these steps, not by being in proximity to the steps, not by listening to others talk about their experience with the steps, but rather by us taking them ourselves. In other words, by working them, whether in a group, or with a sponsor, or with a fellow traveler. Does this mean that you can't have a spiritual awakening without working the steps? Well, maybe you can, but I think working the steps increases your chances and speeds up the process. Although it somewhat depends upon your definition or understanding of spiritual awakening. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous loosely defines it as an interchange sufficient to bring about recovery. If you apply that to the ACA program, and in particular to the Tony A steps, then unconditional self-love would be synonymous with spiritual awakening. Therefore, step 12 could be rewritten. We love ourselves unconditionally as a result of taking these steps. If you have any doubts about this, then read through the 14 traits, which represent the opposite of, or the lack of, self-love. Consider that in step 1, we admit we are powerless over these traits, effects of living with alcoholism, and that they make our lives unmanageable. Yet, by step 12, we are able to love ourselves unconditionally, and it's this unconditional self-love that heals the emotional wounds from childhood, which created the traits in the first place. I cannot think of a more powerful example of a spiritual awakening. It's on par with a hopeless alcoholic having his or her obsession for alcohol lifted. Step 12 then goes on to say, and we continue to love ourselves and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. This tells me that consistent, ongoing self-love is required to sustain recovery, but it also expands it. Remember, step 12 is not the finish line, it's a starting point. Practice these principles, these steps, which are rooted in self-love in all of our affairs, which means in all areas of life. In other words, to love yourself unconditionally in every area of your life. If this sounds good, then stop thinking about doing the steps and actually do the steps. When you do them one at a time, which is the only way to do them, they're very manageable. Before you know it, you're on step 12. ACA's Yellow Steps Workbook does a great job combining the two sets of steps, the official ones, which are the same as AA and Al-Anon, along with the unofficial steps written by ACA founder Tony A. I refer to these as the inner child steps. However, they never directly mention the Tony A steps due to legal issues. If you plan to do this workbook, I suggest you download a copy of the Tony A steps and then write with your own hand the corresponding Tony A step below the official step in each chapter. I guarantee the workbook will make more sense and you'll get more out of it. And that wraps up this video and this series, which is meant to be food for thought. If you got something out of it, please click like and subscribe and forward to a fellow traveler. I'm Robbie Bobby. Thank you for listening, and as always, keep coming back.